we can have a positive goal of increasing their time spent in these activities that we have known for decades and decades of research are really good for kids. And then if they have sufficient time in those categories of activities, then we can worry a little less about the screen time.
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode number 274. Today, we're talking about why we should delay kids' screen time with Dr. Meghan Owenz. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast, now with over 1 million downloads. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have, and when you've calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of Mindful Parenting, and I'm the author of Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Welcome back to the Mindful Mama podcast, my friend. I'm so glad you're here. I know I always say that, but I love this podcast and I love connecting with you. If you're new, this is an awesome episode. And if you're returning, rock on. I'm so glad that we get to connect each week. It really makes a huge difference in my life. In just a moment, I'm going to be sitting down with Dr. Meghan Owenz, and she's the author of the book Spoiled Right, Delaying Screens and Giving Children What They Really Need. And she's a parent, a psychologist, and a university professor. I think you're going to find this a really fascinating and interesting conversation. We're going to talk about why screens should be avoided for children under 5 and how they're actually kind of necessary to an extent for older kids. Really interesting, right? So there's a big age difference in how we should be treating screen time with kids. So if you have been looking for some clear guidance on screen time, if you have kids under 5 or over 5, in fact, I think you're going to get so much out of this. You know, what Dr. Owenz saw in her research and her psychology of how kids are reacting to this. I think this is incredibly valuable information. So I want you to listen for some important takeaways, how some of the negative effects of screen time actually have nothing to do with the screen itself. She's going to share 5 really important activities for children that support a better relationship with screen time. And for older kids, the teens with the best mental well-being have a moderate amount of screen time. So this is going to be a very valuable episode for you. I know. I want to let you know that you can see clips of video from this episode as well as short teaching sessions from me over at our Mindful Mama Mentor YouTube channel. So you can just search for Mindful Mama Mentor there or go into the notes wherever you're listening to this. There's a notes section, show notes section that you can click over to and you'll find a link there. It's really valuable because if you hear some parts of this episode that you want to share with your partner, people who are watching your kids, if you want to share them on social media, you can grab some short clips of the video and share it really easily. So when you're there, make sure you subscribe so that we can grow our little baby YouTube channel and get this information out to more parents. And hey, this probably is not likely, but if you happen to be listening to this just the very day it comes out, we are starting our free 7-day mindfulness challenge for parents. And if you hop in on that, you can go to mindfulmamamentor.com/challenge. And I'll be giving free mindfulness lessons every day for a week. So it's going to be really valuable and lots of fun to do it with hundreds of other parents. So the YouTube channel and then the challenge, if you're listening to this the day it comes out. I think that's all I want to offer you before we dive into this important episode. Come join me at the table as I talk to Dr. Meghan Owenz. Meghan, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about your book, Spoiled Right. You're definitely, this is the perfect time to be talking about screens and kids and all of that with the pandemic. But Can you just indulge me a little bit and just tell me what you just told me?
Yes, absolutely. So I was just saying before we started recording, because I can never wait to start talking. But before we started recording that, I have read about mindfulness and Buddhism and sometimes even meditated with my kids using little apps for a long 10, 15 years. And I'm embarrassed to admit, never regularly meditated myself. Sort of like a one off here or there, like a couple times a month would have been impressive for me. And then Hunter, when I read your book, I think because it's not just intellectual, but encourages you to practice after every chapter. And I kind of was one of those people that was like, I'm just going to keep reading, but I actually did practice too. And so I started meditating regularly when I first read your book, and I never stopped. And so I'm so grateful for that.
Yay! So happy. And it's feeling pretty good, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing for me about it is that it's not, I don't stop meditating and something like groundbreaking happens. Like I don't like
Yeah.
just walk into my day like oh, so peaceful. But it's like this build. I think of it as like this rut in my brain that I'm like building that I can get to this like calm space a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if other people would notice a difference in me, but I notice a difference in myself, I think.
Mm. Yay! Yay! This is so exciting. All right. Well, we'll stop tooting the horn of my book and we'll talk about your book.
We can talk about any book.
Let's talk about all the books.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk to you about this because, because of the current conditions, but also because I really appreciate how you wrote in your book, like, I'm a therapist, a psychologist, a university professor, and a mother, and you became those things in that order. So you had this background about emotions, about psychology, about teaching others about psychology, and then you became a parent, and then you encountered like the screen time issue. So I would love it if you could kind of just take us back to that story about your daughter's challenges and how she responded to some early screen time.
Yeah, yeah. So I had that awareness. So I knew what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended, and I fully intended to do what they recommended, but I didn't really understand it maybe on a personal basis. And then my first daughter she still is a very sensitive child and wicked smart, like too smart for her own good kind
Are
of
you
thing.
a Rhode Islander?
No,
You
no.
just said wicked smart. That's what I said growing up. She's wicked smart. Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, sorry, just go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, I know. That's probably not how a psychologist describes children, but that's what I think when I think of her. Like that's just what comes to mind for her. And she also had really bad reflux. She had reflux so bad that got missed for too long that she ended up with a feeding refusal. So she was a 2, 3 month old baby that refused to eat at
Oh,
all.
oh
And
gosh.
then I actually sleep fed her for 6 months. So then from like 3 months to 9 months, she just thought she didn't eat.
Oh my
She went
gosh.
she went to sleep and woke up kind of full, but she didn't know the process that got her there. And, that sounds really unhealthy. And in most cases it would be, but that was like the alternative to a feeding tube at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to give her a variety of different medications when she was really young. And some of them had to dissolve in her mouth. And so it wasn't just like, you shoot with a syringe into an infant's mouth or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. But like we had to hold her mouth closed as gently and
Oh my
kindly as we
God.
could, but not allow her to spit this medication out until it
Oh.
dissolved. And we tried a bunch of different ones. And, some of the medications didn't taste good. Plus, she had this whole idea that having things in her mouth was what caused her discomfort. And so she
Mm-hmm.
really didn't like that, even as a young infant. And so we turned to a screen and we
Mm-hmm.
would put it on for, I think it was Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse. I think I still remember the song from this. And we would put that on for her for just like a minute or two to try. So she would be calm enough that we could give her the medication. Um, and she was like, she could go from fighting you and really upset to like that glazed over, like, oh, what is this look really, really quick at like 5 months of age, 6 months of age. And that was the only time we used it, and she didn't want it turned off. She had
Mm.
difficulty. If we turned it off, she would get really frustrated. And this wasn't like, we weren't sitting her in front of it all morning or anything like that. And it was just really interesting to see the pull that a screen could have over a little itty bitty baby of that age. And so I kind of started to dig in more into how the programming is designed and what's going on brain wise to understand better um, why it was hard for her to turn off and why it had this mesmerizing effect on her.
Wow. Wow. I mean, yeah. That that sounds like exactly what you should have done, right? Like it's like a very useful application of the
Yeah,
tool of screen time. That sounds like
yeah.
an incredibly challenging baby to start off with, though. I hope number 2 was a lot easier and you guys
He was so much
were
easier.
like
They're both wonderful, totally different personalities, but we prepped, my oldest daughter, we're like, sometimes babies cry all day, like we like really like she was like, "Whoa, why are we doing this?" And then he came along and he was like, "Meh." He was just like this super, super calm, super mellow baby. And she's like, "You guys are
Oh.
really over dramatic."
Well, that's good. I'm glad for you. You had it in that order so
Yeah.
you could be prepared. So what did you discover with the research? What is happening in the brain? What are some of the effects of screen time on infants and young kids?
Yeah. So when we're talking about, I really like acronyms. So when I talk about young kids, so under fives, I use the acronym SWAT for SWAT the screen time because those are the five big areas where I think we have, the best research in terms of some of the negative associations we see with screens. So S stands for sleep. Children who have high amounts of recreational screen time. This means, like for fun, for pleasure, that they go to bed later and that they have their total sleep duration is shorter. W is for weight, that there's associations in between recreational screen time and weight for kids. A for attention, which is one of the ones that I
Overweight,
find.
I
Yeah,
assume? Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. A for attention, which I think is really interesting, looking at the ways in which a 2, 3, 4 year old we think of as generally inattentive, and looking at the ways in which screen time affects their attention. We have experimental and longitudinal research that shows a negative effect of recreational screen time for young kids, and then their attentional abilities at age 7 when they're in school. The second A is for aggression. So kids are great at modeling. That's why your work in terms of helping us to be mindful, right? And to carefully choose our words is really important because they're watching what we're doing and they are watching what's on screen too. And they tend to attend to the content that is most overwhelming for them in a way, right? So if
Hmm.
they watch a show and there's maybe some aggressive content, but the moral of the show is that aggression is not good and we shouldn't hit or we shouldn't say unkind things. Kids tend to remember that we hit, right? Or that we say unkind things. And here I'm talking about little kids.
Mhm.
So when they just attend to that, it's like, you think about some of the psychological principles that make people bad eyewitnesses. Like if they see a gun, they only remember the gun, right? They don't
Mm.
remember the person's face. It's kind of the same thing with kids and aggression and content. There was a really interesting study of Clifford the Big Red Dog, where there was a
Mm.
dog with only 3 legs, and the kids were mean to him, and they excluded this dog. But in the end, it was like disabilities are okay and we should accept everybody and treat everybody equally. And like the kids who watched it that were too young, so they were 4 or 5, a little younger than the intended audience, they got the opposite message from the
Oh
program, which
god.
is so sad, right? Because
Oh man.
they just attended to that time that was really salient for them when the kids were being mean, and so that like they couldn't connect to the beginning, middle, and end of the show when they were too little for the show. um and then the
They're almost like modeling, like it's like the brain is, the most developed part of the brain when you're born, right, is your stress response system, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the only fully developed whole system in the brain. So like that part of the brain that's looking out for threats is fully developed and is like, "Oh, a threat," right? And so then that's the thing that's really sticking, sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Mhm.
they're just not paying attention at the end
Okay.
when everybody's, like, calmly getting a message, right? They're, like, somewhere else, right?
Okay.
And then the T is for talking, so there's a connection in between screen time in young children and language acquisition. So a really interesting study that showed, for each 30-minute increase they had with a handheld device, like a parent's cell phone or an iPad, that toddlers, were 49% more likely to have a language delay.
Mm.
And so, kids learn talking through, there's been a lot of efforts to teach kids talk, language through videos. Those companies have been sued and lost, and they just do not learn language through videos. And anything that says your kid is going to learn language by watching and engaging with a program, that's just not the case. They get it from human interaction.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. So, if you saw my Instagram, you may have seen that I did a little yoga in the park recently with my down vest on because it has been such a chilly spring. I'm so excited for going back to yoga or even yoga outside, but it's still cold here. And I want the amazing benefits of yoga in my life. So I am so excited about our sponsor, Bulldog Yoga Online. They take the intimidation out of yoga and they replace it with music, smiles, and no judgment at all. So you can get all the amazing benefits of yoga: increased strength, better flexibility, improved mental focus, all of that stuff without going in person or trying to fit it into your schedule. Bulldog Online is about making yoga fun. Bulldog's online streaming classes are available on demand, anytime, any place on your schedule. They offer classes for kids and teens, so you can get your Bulldog on and get moving with the whole family. Bulldog online classes are easy to follow and they're set to really great playlists that motivate you and keep you and your family smiling through all the movement. And there are choices for all levels, from beginner to really heart pumping workouts. And there are tons of class lengths, which is really nice to fit your schedule. The classes range from 12 to 60 minutes. So I have really loved the classes. They're really fun. They make me smile. They make me move. It feels great. And it's fun to do something new and different, a new class every time. Try your first 30 days for free at bulldogonline.com. That's bulldogonline.com. Use the code HUNTER for an additional 50% off your first paid month. Again, that's bulldogonline.com, coupon code HUNTER, and you can find that link in the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast. They're sleeping less. That's so huge because of the way your brain learns, and that can lead to learning deficiencies and just things like that. I know that my own daughter had like a sleep apnea, and when
Mm,
finally got her tonsils out, then her that's when her reading went crazy. It's like, oh, now she could sleep the whole night through. And then she started
right.
to read and read and read and read and read. It was pretty amazing. So weight, attention, aggression, and talking. So I guess as you were like looking into this, you started to say, oh crap, what have I done to my child? Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we stopped really quick with what we were doing. And I should say that if there are parents listening whose kids have some sort of a medical issue and they use screen times judiciously to help the
Mhm.
child with a treatment of some sort, that is not considered, a bad use of screen time, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
but for us, it was like, wait a minute, let's back up and let's see if we can help her, understand that we have to do this in a more respectful fashion, that isn't just kind of distracting her from it, but is trying to loop her into what we're doing. And maybe it won't be as easy for us in the beginning, but maybe that means that it'll be more meaningful for her in the long run, right? That we don't do things to her, but we try to do them with her, and that sounds silly for a 6-month old, but it really is a different perspective that was meaningful for us.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's kind of like it's like you can do those things with a 6-month-old. You start to say it all out loud, like,
Right,
I'm gonna take off your diaper now. Does this feel okay? I think all of that kind
right,
of modeling that respectful language, even if they're not getting all of it and et cetera, that's how you start, right? That's how you start to learn and
right.
practice those things. And that's how kids start to get those expectations
Yeah.
about how they'll be treated.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So we stopped pretty quick, and then she didn't have any screen time, and we got to 2. And here
mhm.
I had started digging. I had really been involved in digging into the research and doing some writing and things. And we looked at her and we're like, now she's 2 in one day. So now at the time, then it was like that was the switch to 1 hour in the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement. We were like, why would we do 1 hour of screen time a day at this point? And so we decided to keep going and to keep her, totally screen free as long as possible. She's 9 now and her brother is 6. And I really believe in keeping the kids, delaying it as long as you can based on your family circumstances, but definitely till age 5. And so both of them were totally screen free through to age 5, which is much easier than, kids your age, Hunter. That's just not an option. But the thing is, it is easier to keep them screen free. So if you can do that, if you can put a little effort up front, it is much easier. And there will be plenty of time later when they have to be introduced to screens for a variety of things.
Yeah, I'm so with you, and I was so frustrated with my husband, who's a computer programmer, who's like, "Oh, she's 2, like, she's 2.5, like, let's get her started on some early, like, programming kind of things," and he got hers, and I was like, "Okay, fine," and I was sort of arguing this sort of other side, but I'm really with you in that, that we we limited our kids' screen time a lot more than most other kids, maybe less than
Mhm.
some people. And we got to see so much creative play. And now is a whole different story now that they're 11 and 14 and we're in a pandemic, and it's a totally different story. But this is really different. Like, what you're advocating is really, really different from what's happening for most kids, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
do you know what kind of the statistics are for most kids now? Because I mean, I
Yeah.
see that all the time. A kid in a stroller who's too
Mhm.
young to like go walk, holding a phone and watching the phone while they're walking outside.
Mhm.
And it's like, hmm, like, I just, but this is the lay of the land these days, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so some of that, I mean, my husband and I together run a website called screenfreeparenting.com where we're just trying to be as loud and trendy as we can to to fight with the technology companies who are really pushing parents and pushing kids to do it younger and younger and younger. And I do feel for parents in that most parents introduce it thinking that it is something that is good or healthy for their child, right? So they don't want
Mhm.
their kid to be left behind. They want help teaching colors or numbers. And then once they introduce it, they realize that it's like a really messy playground where like nothing is designed appropriately for their child, and they're like running around trying to save them from the climbing structure that's way too big for them. And it's just persuasive design runs so rampant in children's applications and games and programs that then you have a kid who has no emotion regulation because they're 2, and so they don't come with that, right?
Mhm.
And they want more and more and more of it. And
Mhm.
the parent ends up in this crazy power struggle where they are set up to lose because the programming has been designed so that the kid will want more of it.
So how did you and your husband, how did you limit the screen time, or basically have not much screen time at all, very, very limited screen time before the age of 5, assuming that you watch some Netflix now and then on your own?
Yeah.
Like, how did you do that yourself? What were some of the strategies you did?
Yeah, yeah. So I think where I still try to be, one thing that I have totally failed at during the pandemic is we were really conscious. We both work full time, really conscious about the work that we did in front of our kids with a screen,
Mhm.
and really conscious of our own phone use and kind of thinking ahead to like when they're teenagers, this is what we're going to want them to do with the phone that they might have. And so we need to do that now. Like, let's be really intentional and respectful about our use of technology. And then the pandemic hit, and there's like we're just like all over the house supervising while also in meetings and teaching classes. And so we're, initially I would have students hand things in on paper so I could grade on paper while I was also supervising the kids so that they could understand better what I was doing.
Mm.
So it wasn't like this confusing black box that pulls me in kind of thing, right? But they could
Mhm.
understand, like, students write things and mom reads them, and I give them feedback, and they could see that and be like, okay, that's totally boring. I'm going to go back to the Ford I was making. But in terms of our own recreational screen time, we do things, similar to you. We have a screen-free day a week, and it is so restorative. It feels like there's extra hours in the day there. It's
Mhm.
wonderful. And we would, if we were going to have some Netflix or like something we were going to do with screens for fun, we would do that after our kids went to bed. Sleep is so important for kids. And so they were in bed by 7:30, and that gave us plenty of time if we wanted to do something like that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds really, really pretty reasonable. I mean, especially
Mhm.
um, considering the negative side effects that we're seeing. In that whole image of like that kind of like hypnotized toddler just staring into space. And you talk about you describe a situation, and I think it's like the first chapter where there's like this someone a child like kind of like hypnotized, completely wrapped during a 74-minute presentation
Yes.
of children's songs. And it's like for like a, I don't know, 20-month-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's frightening because that's not what kids are supposed to do, right? They're not supposed to be completely wrapped for 74 minutes.
No, no, there is something wrong there, right? Like if your kid is sitting silent, glazed over, not realizing they're hungry or tired or something like that for 74 minutes at 20 months of age, there's a problem there. But that wasn't in description. That was a description of a child who was watching a YouTube video of songs, baby songs. And it could have been any content because it was really just flashing constant screen shifts, which is some of the worst kinds of screen time. And that's what I mean by, this playground equipment that wasn't meant for them. It wasn't, they didn't look at a child and think about what does a kid need, which is what some high quality programming was designed that way. I mean, Sesame Street was designed that way, looking at children, looking at educational gaps of kids in kindergarten and figuring out how could we use media to help with that. Lots of children's programming now is designed for how can I loop them in and make them look at my thing the longest so that I have the most ad revenue, right? And so
Mhm.
there's like no thought about what would be good for this kid. Sesame Street had built-in breaks to it of like that were encouraging the kids to get up and leave and go outside and start a conversation and things like that. And the program is exactly opposite that now, right? It's encouraging your kid to watch it and not realize that the sun has risen and is starting to set.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. Okay, so I was looking in the mirror the other day, looking at the gray hairs of my temple and thinking, oh my gosh, no women in pop culture that are showing positive gray hair except for like Morticia Adams and Cruella de Vil. Men, boy, they have George Clooney and so many others. But anyway, there's no denying it. I'm going gray. What my 14-year-old tells me is that gray hair is kind of cool now. However, I have noticed that my gray hair is different from the hair I had in my 20s. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do with this aging and changing hair, but I'm thrilled that we have a podcast sponsor called Gemist. Gemist makes very high quality personalized hair care. You take a short 2-minute quiz and they match you with the perfect shampoo and conditioner based on your hair type, texture, and hair concerns. And I'm telling you, it has made such a difference and made this transition into all these silver gray hairs so much easier. They also matched me with this scalp balancing bar, which, if I am being honest, was the thing I didn't know I needed in my life. It is the best shampoo and conditioner I've ever tried. It really, really works. And you can also save money by subscribing. Not only that, but Gemist is woman owned. The CEO and founder, Allison Haar, is a Harvard graduate. There's free returns and you can save with a subscription service. And for me, what I really like is that it's really high quality ingredients, free of sulfates, parabens, it's dye free, it's never tested on animals, and it's manufactured in the US. It's shipped right to your door. And your hair looks amazing. So if you are ready to have the best hair of your life, try Gemist. Right now, my listeners can give Gemist a try and get 20% off their shampoo and conditioner Smart subscription. Smart subscribers already save 20% off on each order, so this is an amazing deal. And with free 2-day shipping, you can have it by this weekend. Just visit gemist.com to get your personalized recommendation and enter Hunter at checkout for 20% off and free 2-day shipping. That's gemist.com, GEMMIST.com, and enter the code HUNTER at checkout to get the best hair of your life. And as always, that link is right in the show notes. It's amazing. It's like the attention economy. And now I think
Yeah.
of like my 14-year-old on TikTok, which is like
Yeah.
apparently my husband, he got onto TikTok for a little while just to experience it. He felt like he felt like it hurt his brain after a while, like his
Yeah.
attention was scrambled as an adult. And I'm like, oh man, TikTok.
Yeah.
But this is the same kid that, she yeah, we had this screen-free life, and I would like to just I want to kind of segue into that question of like what, okay, so you didn't have screens, you didn't have their hour screen time every day, between the ages of 2 and 5. So what did your kids do, right? And that's the question that we get that I've gotten a lot, but I'm really interested to hear about your answer. Like what happened with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I talk about in the book is that we see all these negative associations, that sort of SWOT acronym we just went over with little kids and screen time. And there's two major theories about why we have those negative associations. So, one theory that I think has really gotten disproportionate attention says that it's due to the content, like that video on YouTube has fast, rapid screen shifts, and that's causing attention problems later on, or the content in Clifford the Big Red Dog is developmentally inappropriate. And so, if that's the problem, then we keep telling parents, watch with your kids, check ratings, play with your kids, do all these things to like check out, make sure the content is great. But there's another theory, and that's the displacement theory, which says that some of the negative effects of screen time might have nothing to do with the screen time itself. Your kid might be watching like beautiful nature documentaries, or whatever, right? But like water in a bathtub, as they fill up their day with more of that, there's less time for these things that are really good for physical and psychological development of children. And so it's the loss of those activities that is driving some of these negative effects.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, that's confusing as a parent because now you have to orient not only to, what your kid is doing, but also to what your kid is not doing. And you don't really know the
Mm.
answer to that, right?
Mhm.
But the positive thing about displacement is that it gives us an in, like we can have a positive goal of increasing their time spent in these activities that we have known for decades and decades of research are really good for kids. And then if they have sufficient time in those categories of activities, then we can worry a little less about the screen time because we know it's not displacing the things that are really key for their cognitive, emotional, physical development.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I like how you talk about that too because you're right. Like you mentioned that, like kind of like weight loss. Like we don't do well when we
yes.
say don't do this or you have to be restricted in this. And like we all hate to be restricted. Everyone, all human beings at every age hate to be
Yes.
restricted. And so instead, with the displacement theory, you're saying like instead, like let's focus on what we do want to do at that time, how we can fill that time. So let's get to like the idea of maybe the pandemic later. Let's imagine a
Okay.
non-pandemic world.
Oh,
what
that's
are
wonderful.
It'll happen someday. What are the things that what are we wanting to do with our kids that the
Yeah.
time is displacing?
Yeah. So as I was digging into the research, I was looking at these things that are really good for kids. And I was also looking at the activities of childhood that have an inverse relationship with screen time, meaning as screen time goes up, the time that children spend in these activities goes down. And so the cool thing about that is that maybe as the activity time spent in those activities goes up, screen time will go down. And so the five activities, it's another acronym, and the acronym is SPOIL, which is the title of the book, Spoiled Right. And it stands for S is for social, face to face social interactions, play, where children are learning cooperation, competition, perspective taking, all those things. The P in spoil is for play, free play. That is, freely chosen by the child and self-directed. O is for outdoor time. I mean, you can't read the chapter on outdoor without like throwing the book in the corner and running outside because it's just so good for your kids. We see an impact and the opposite effects of screen time, right? Like we see an inverse relationship in between total sleep and screen time. The more screens kids are engaged with, the less sleep they have. The more time they have outside, the more sleep they have, right? So like it really counteracts some of these negative effects. So time outdoors, the I stands for independent work, like chores, things that your child kind of has to put aside their immediate interest in pursuit of a long term goal. So that could be chores, that could be schoolwork as they get older. And then the L in SPOIL stands for literacy based activities, reading, being read to, listening to an audiobook, paging through a book, and looking at pictures as a pre reader. That those are the five activities that seem to be really kind of losing out to screen time and some other cultural things, and that are really, really good for kids and have the opposite effect of screen time. Time outdoors, reading, play, they all build attention skills. So if we're worried about the impact of attention on our, screens on our children's attention, we can increase their time spent in these activities and hope that it's at least leveling things out a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, this is the thing that gives me hope for like this past year with my children and their remote learning and their all no access to friends except for on Minecraft. That at least for like the first 9 plus
Yeah.
years, 10 plus years, they had so much outdoor time, so
Yeah.
much free play time, so much creative play time, social, free, all of those things that are shown the human development. I mean, this is just like what humans need, right? Like
Yep.
human kids need, young kids need free play, outdoor time. We all need outdoor time,
Hmm.
doing chores. Can we dive into a little bit more of these? Which one is your favorite one to dive into first?
I don't know. But I do want to say that you are right, that you should feel a little bit better with like the pandemic induced crazy screen time of everybody. Because there is research to show that, screen time habits and rules in the family when the children are young are predictive of problematic media use later when the kids are older. And so it does help to kind of set that foundation even though things maybe might feel a little more chaotic and out of control as they need it for school or they need it for some socialization aspects because they have that grounding in how to socialize, how to direct their day, how to direct their attention prior to having got the screen. And that's really different than a child who didn't get to have that experience. So I do think that you should feel good about that.
Good, good. Thank you, Megan. Um, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like those are like 0 to 5. These are
Yeah.
incredibly prime brain development years, like psychological development, emotional development,
Yeah.
development of everything. Our kids are, human beings are so immature and underdeveloped when we're
Yeah.
born compared to every other mammal or animal in the
Yeah.
world, right? So like
Yeah.
these years are incredibly important. Now I'm worried that the listener who has a child
Yeah.
who's age 4 and is saying, "Oh my god, Megan and Hunter, like that sounds great and I agree with you and everything, but this past year has
Mhm.
been what it has been." And do you have any steps for helping people walk it back if
Yeah.
it's gone too far? Because that's the hardest thing is like creating those boundaries and having healthy boundaries. And I want to ask you about, I'm curious about, I have a friend who has kids who are all 10 and older,
Okay.
who has started to take a more screen neutral approach, like no restriction kind of in the house. And I'm curious if you've heard anything about that. I'm just totally curious about that. So those it's one question, then the second question, I guess.
Yeah.
How can we walk it back? Let's go
Yeah.
there.
So, how to walk it back. For little kids and for older kids, I would have two different answers. So, let's assume that the kids are under the age of 5. So, they're
Okay.
little and they don't need it for socialization, right?
Mhm.
Because, a 13 or 14-year-old does maybe need it for socialization. I will get behind in the 13-year-old corner and say, like,
Yeah.
she's kind of right a little, and research supports that idea. But our little ones, they really don't. So I really recommend, participating in a really fun week, like a campaign for commercial-free childhood, screen-free week, which is coming up, and talking to your kids about it ahead of time and saying, hey, in the pandemic, we've all, mommy, daddy, everybody has gotten really had a lot of fun on their screens, more than we usually do. And for this 1 week, we're going to take a break and we're going to try to remember all those things that we'd really like to do instead and really fill that week with fun stuff and ask them what kind of things they would like to do. If you can pick up more audiobooks from the library, try to think through some of the tough times in your household, if it's, in the morning or if it's in the evening, if it's dinner time, whatever it is, and what you're going to put in place there. And I have some good ideas for that in the book as well as on our website. Um, and you want to try with little kids, a span of time, a week would be great, where they don't have screens as a part of their regular day, and see how things lay out, because it can be hard to figure out what impact it's having on their sleep or what impact it's having on their play, when it's such a prominent thing for them. And then after you take a little break, it can be easier to prioritize like the spoil categories while also having, some screen time that is at an appropriate time for your family with an appropriate content. Um, so that's how I would walk it back. Then you asked the question about the person with no limits. And I think it's probably going to depend a lot on the individual child. So we've talked a lot about research wise, like what is the tipping point? What is the number of hours where screen time becomes problematic? That's almost always a question that parents have. And research has found, like a range. However, it is really child dependent. So you might have kids that are at the low end of that range that are showing what we would call problematic media habits. And there's a validated scale for that. So they're like at the low end and they're having trouble verbalizing about anything other than the game they're playing, and they're having a really hard time turning it off. They're thinking about it more and more. They're sneaking it. It's causing fights in the family. Like those are all signs that is problematic for them. And then you might have a kid at the high end who has like no issues whatsoever, and they're still outside and they're still sleeping great. And so there's some differences there in how
Mm.
it's going to impact different kids, right? And so
But it is like what I kind of come back to is that when I get where I get confused about this is that it's addictive, right? I mean, it has all that persuasive, psychology behind it to make it addictive, like more so than, reading even reading Harry Potter is. As addictive as Harry Potter is with all those cliffhangers. But right? I mean, that's
right,
that's that's what
right.
I get hung up on as I think about that idea.
Yes, yes. So, and the thing is that Harry Potter ends too. I mean, maybe it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it if you're reading it aloud to your kid, and you're falling asleep while you do it. But it's a really good book. But parents are tired, and the books are long. But it does have an end point, and then the kid moves on to something else. The thing is that the internet and children's programming and game, like there is no end. Like they could do it forever and they would never get to the bottom of it. And that's something that like most parents, we didn't experience as kids because
That's true.
there was no internet when I was a kid. And there was TV, but it was self-limiting because it was only child appropriate at certain times,
Yeah,
like
and
like
then it was
Saturday morning.
Three's then it was Three's Company after school, which wasn't,
Yeah.
like, so child appropriate, but I watched it anyway.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I remember that too. But, and so like eventually there was nothing on for us to watch. Like if we stayed up
True.
too late, then you were watching an infomercial and you were
That's
like,
true.
what do I want that? what is this?
Do I
Is this a
want
real?
40 CDs of classic rock? No, I don't.
Right, right. And so I was like, this is I'm actually tired. I'm gonna go to bed. Right. And so that will never happen to our kids on the internet. Like
That's
it never
true.
gets boring. And so it really requires the parents to do so much more work than parents of previous generations did in creating those boundaries around the screen time. And so maybe you have a kid who is just real easygoing, doesn't have problematic media habits, and they're able to turn it off, and good for them. But that doesn't mean that that parent or that kid is doing anything better than the parent of the kid who really can't turn it off.
Mm,
Okay. Because of persuasive design, because it was designed that way for the kid to not turn it off, for them to feel like they're going to die, they're going to miss out on something, they're going to,
mm-hmm.
these are all psychological phenomenon that we're now studying. We're studying FOMO, or fear of missing out, in teenagers. Like, it's a real thing. It's linked with
Oh my
anxiety and
gosh.
depression. It's research wise, it's a real thing. And it's a real thing because it was created to be a real thing. Because if they could induce those feelings in that teenage girl or boy, they could get them to log back on. They could trigger them to log back on and tunnel them back in and spend more time, and they would, their products,
Merch,
value
the
goes up.
YouTubers, Mom, Wilbur is going live doing blah 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 right now, and
Right,
I'm like, isn't it recorded? Like, can't you just
right.
watch it later? Like, why do you have to go right now to do this thing? Like, I hear that for sure, and
Yeah,
following the Minecraft YouTubers in my house.
yeah, yeah, and so
Um,
it's unfair to the kids, and it's unfair to the parents, and the spoil system is a way of trying to say,
mm,
whoa, like,
mhm,
deep breath. These are the things that really matter. So you don't have to get media whiplash from every study, because it's going to take decades to figure out all the ways in which it's problematic and all the ways in which it's not.
mhm.
But you can focus more on the things that are really good for kids and families, and then maybe worry a little less when they feel like they need to run to YouTube immediately to watch that video, because you know that they spent time outside, and you know that they've been reading, and you know that they've been playing with a friend and talking to you, and like had all these positive experiences that are necessary for their development. It's not infiltrating those things. If you can if you can
Mm.
prioritize those and not let them get edged out, then you can worry a little less.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. So, I personally think that your bank account should work with you, not against you. And that's why I'm excited that Chime is a sponsor of the podcast. It's an award-winning app and debit card with no hidden fees or monthly minimums. Because you earned your money and you deserve to keep it. So it has fee-free overdraft for up to $100 in debit purchases with the Spot Me program. It's like overdraft protection, but better. You can get your paycheck, your benefits, stimulus check, and tax return up to 2 days earlier with direct deposit. There are no hidden fees or monthly minimums. Plus, there are 38,000 fee-free ATMs with MoneyPass and Visa Plus Alliance. And plus, the security is great. You can turn on alerts to let you know when your card is used and instantly block your card if something seems fishy. And then when you sign up for a Chime spending account, you can enroll in an optional savings account and grow your savings automatically with a 0.5% annual percentage yield. That's 10 times the national average. Join the millions on Chime. Sign up takes 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Apply now at chime.com/hunter. That's chime.com/hunter. chime.com/hunter. Chime is a financial technology company. Banking services provided by the Bank Corp Bank or Stride Bank NA. Members FDIC. Eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Overdraft only applies to debit card purchases. Limits start at $20 and may be increased up to $100 by Chime. Early direct deposits depend on the payer. Out-of-network cash withdrawal fees apply. Third-party and cash deposit fees may apply. Go to chime.com/hunter for the details. This is very helpful. I love this. So, parents of young kids, reduce the screen time as much as you can.
Yeah.
Fill it with that good time. I love the idea of kind of a detox week. I can imagine some challenging conversations between
Yeah.
parenting partners about this because
Yeah.
it's not like a real fun thing. It's kind of like your dryuary for some parents. Like, do I really want to do that? And but I think that's a great idea. This when is the screen free week? What week is it every year? I used to remember it was
Uh,
like
I think it's May 3rd, but I will feel terrible because I work with a campaign for commercial-free childhood a lot. They're a great organization. You can sign up on their website. It's CCFC, the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, and they'll send you like a kit. They're a nonprofit. They'll send you like a kit with ideas and things like that. And they have information for schools that want to promote it and participate in Screen Free Week and ways to integrate it with the curriculum and all those sorts of things. But it's coming up, and I want to say it's early May, but I could be totally wrong. And I'm sorry if I am.
That's okay. That's okay. So, now what um what do you think about older kids? Selfishly, I'm asking, what do
Yeah.
you think about older kids and the world we're currently living in this spring slash summer of 2021 where we're remote learning, the only way to see some friends is playing Minecraft and talking to each
Yep.
other. Um, and um, do you have any advice for us who are struggling in that situation with some older kids?
Yeah. So first, I have a great deal of empathy because screen free for little kids is held up as it's like this, some sort of like crazy ideal that really involved parents do. And I think it's actually, in my perspective, it's just like the lazier choice. Like I remember at like 3, it was like, I can co-view a program with you. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to watch, if I'm going to sit with you, I'm going to read to you. I'm going to do something that, you can learn to do later on your own to entertain yourself. So like, it's way the lazier version. And yet it's good for your kid.
And
Now, when your kid,
I want to interject here because I just want for the parents who are like, "Oh, it's easier." I have to back you up, Megan, because it is. You just
Mhm,
say there's something to do is right around the corner.
yep,
Kim Payne said that something to do is right around the corner. You have some open-ended toys around. You don't have to have a lot. You just kick them outside if you have a
yep,
backyard, if you're lucky enough to have that. But you don't have to be your kids. We're not saying be your kids entertainer. Megan is not
no,
saying be your kids entertainer. They can do that. It will be like maybe 5 or 10 minutes of painful whining
mhm,
and all you say is something to do is right around the corner, you become more boring than whatever it is around your house. And it's not that hard. Sorry.
yep.
Just I
No,
want to back you
I'm
up there.
I'm glad you highlighted that because I also think the parents that come to me and are like, "Oh my, how do you do how I could never do that. I would never be able to shower. I would never be able to do this. I would." They're dealing with a problem that the screen created that only the screen can solve. And because every time their child maybe had to deal with some negative emotion, like mom's in the shower, mom said no, mom won't do this for me, or dad, or whomever, um, they had access to a screen, and so they actually never dealt with any of those negative emotions because the screen can totally distract them from it and they don't know that they have to feel it. And so when you take away the screen for that kid who's had it for a while, like boredom does feel worse than it does for a kid who hasn't had it because they don't have all those little micro dose exposures to it. And so that parent says, like, my kid would lose it if I tried to make dinner, if I tried to take a shower, if I tried to have a meeting. But the thing is that over time, when they're exposed to, the next great thing is right around the corner. You've got lots of toys. I'm busy right now, but I'll be with you in 15 minutes when I'm out of the shower, or whatever it is. Then they have to deal with that over time and they get used to it. That and emotion regulation builds. Now, I'm not saying like we want to make our kids miserable, but we do want our children to be exposed to things like frustration and boredom, and to know that they can get through it. The message is not like I want you to be frustrated, but you're frustrated. That's a human thing. And I know that you're going to get through it and I'll be here. And we all deal with frustration over time. Again, not something our parents had to deal with. Cause like if I wanted a lollipop in the grocery store and my mom said no, there was no like magical device that was going to sing to me and change colors and like make me feel better about it. Like I just had to deal with it and like be mad at my mom, you know? But that was good. And, so over time, your kid will develop this capacity for self-directed play as they get exposed to it in little doses. That's how we all did it. We all got exposed in little doses to not having somebody's attention 24/7. And we learned how to direct our own day. And then it is so easy once they have had some exposure to that because they are busy and they know where the limit is.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that detox week. Okay, so it's not as hard as you think, parents of younger
Yes.
kids. Now, parents of older
Okay.
kids.
Parents of older kids. Okay. So those parents get a big dose of empathy from me because research shows what which is that, those kids aren't that are screen free and 14, they're not really doing so good. Okay. So there's sort of this U-shaped curve with screen time and mental well-being that the kids with no screen time are not doing very well.
Mm.
And the kids with too much screen time are not doing very well. And the kids who have a moderate amount, they're the ones that are doing the best. And so you don't get to do the super easy thing and just be like, oh, we just don't do that in our house, right? You have to parent in the middle, which is harder. Um, but going along the research, you do have to have some limits if your kid doesn't seem to be able to find them on their own, right?
Which is most
Um,
kids, I
yeah,
imagine,
which is
because it's most
most
human
kids.
beings.
Hmm.
I mean, if we didn't have to work and I don't know, how many people would just be
We just
watching
get lost.
Bridgerton
Yeah.
for 7 hours a
Yeah, we just get totally
day?
lost in it. It never ends. It's amazing. It never ends. So, you have to kind of parent in the middle and you have to be the one to place the limits because the screens come with no limit. There is no end to them. Um, but I do recommend that you can do the same thing, the same spoil system by
Mm,
sitting down and talking with your kids about what do they want to do more of? Like, how can you turn this into a positive thing? Instead of
mm,
it being, you get 2 hours and you don't get any more and we're going to turn it off. Like
mm,
sitting down and saying, what are the things that you haven't gotten to do of? What are the things you want to do more of? And creating a list as a family and then really showing up to try to increase time spent in those activities as a family to incidentally reduce the screen time because what you referred to at the beginning, Hunter, is my favorite research study, which is those positive versus negative goals. They had families where there was one obese parent, which is a predictor for the childhood obesity, and they broke them into two groups, and one group got a diet plan to avoid high fat, high sugar foods. So they got this negative goal, right? That's like cut the screen time, only do 2 hours, whatever. And then the other group, they didn't talk to them about high fat, high sugar foods at all, but instead they got a nutrition plan to increase fruits and vegetables. And they followed them for a year. And the families that had lost more weight were the fruit and vegetable families. They had increased their fruit and vegetable intake. They had cut high fat, high sugar foods without being told to, because as they ate more fruits and vegetables, they just had less space for them. And so, this idea of focusing on avoidance and limits, we have limited willpower and only last for so long. And so if we
mm,
can kind of flip, it's the same conversation, but it is a different perspective. And so if we can talk to our teens about what they want to do more of,
mhm.
and that's not, more time on the screen, and we can show up and help them with those things and we can help them see the good experiences that maybe take a little more effort. Teens
Mhm.
can get together for something like a baseball game, socially distanced and masked. It's like impossible for a 4-year-old to have a socially distanced masked play date. Like
Yeah.
I've done that, like they're like, what, 6 feet away? Like, no, what am I supposed to talk to him about? What he's read? What are you saying? Like they just want to play and like get in each other's faces. Like we're like teens, like they want to talk. And so you can get together outside and you can sit outside masked and just like there's ways to get teens together that is harder than just allowing them to do it on their phones, but it will also result in them having more fun and feeling better. And so it'll be self-reinforcing. So just like we need to like show them the good books and, help them understand the good foods, we need to show them the meaningful ways to really get their social needs met and things like that.
Mm. This is so, so helpful, Megan. I really, really appreciate it. It's making me think like my teen and she's in Scouts, BSA. She's in
Yeah.
a girls troop of the Boy Scouts. And we went on an ice hike. I never would have planned something like that or done something like that. And I was so happy we finally did it, like like we did it. It was amazing. And it was safe and wonderful and all this stuff. But I love that. So what do you want to do more of? That's great. Okay. Megan, I
Yeah.
could probably talk to you about longer. There's so much to say, obviously, but listener, definitely check out Megan's book, Spoiled Right. Check out the screenfreeparenting.com. So much great information there. And yeah, I believe in this. It's like it really, yeah, we need to walk the middle path. And right now, our culture is pointing us to so much excess and
Hmm.
distraction, and which is really harmful for our minds and our hearts ultimately, right? Nobody's going
Yeah.
to look back and say, oh, that 1 hour of screen of TV, that was like one of the best times in my life. No one's going to do that, right? Like that was so anyway, Megan, is there anything that we missed that you want to leave the listener with, and also, any other places you want them to reach out and find you?
No, no, you can find us there. You can find us on Facebook. The book has, for each of the categories, all the research on them. And then I think like 20 to 25 different ideas for each category to get you started. So if you have a child and you're not sure how to get started, we give you a bunch of ideas. And like Hunter said, you have the ideas in the beginning as you're helping a child maybe wean or decrease the time they're spending on a screen, and then they take off, right? And you don't really have to do much. You don't have to entertain them all the time. They'll be able to entertain themselves.
Thank you so much, Megan, for sharing this research and all these incredible ideas and doing the work that you're doing to help us all in this area. I think it's really really important. I can't wait to give away the wonderful 2 copies of the book that I have of yours to some people who can use it. And yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hunter. Thanks for having me.
I am so on board with Megan's campaign to reclaim some of the time our kids are dedicating to their screens, especially now post pandemic. I think that we can start to be more intentional, hopefully, about the way it can take over our kids' lives. So I hope you found this episode valuable. If you did, it really makes a huge difference to me when you let me know. I love seeing the screenshots. You can take a screenshot of where you're listening to this and share it with me. I'm at Mindful Mama Mentor on Instagram, and let me know what takeaways you're getting from this awesome interview with Dr. Megan. This is such an important issue. And remember, we have clips from this episode over at YouTube. So we pull out like 5-minute clips. So if you want to share some short bits of this with people in your life, with social media, that is a really great way to do it. And of course, when you're over there, be sure to subscribe so that we can grow our little baby channel too. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. I'm so glad to be connecting with you. We're moving into spring in my life, and it's beautiful here in Delaware. And I've been able to see some amazing things recently. I got to see a baby horse born in the middle of the night. And I'm just feeling really grateful for that, really grateful for my vaccine and my tax dollars paying for that vaccine. Thank you. And I hope that you are seeing some light after our long winter as well, wherever you are. And maybe that's just in your personal world and not in your country yet, but I hope you're seeing some light in your world. And I can't wait to connect with you again next week. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you sharing your time and spending this time with me here. It's awesome. So glad we can connect. And I wish you a wonderful, peaceful week and less stress, more joy, all that good stuff. Take care. Namaste.
I'd say definitely do it. It's really helpful. It will change your relationship with your kids for the better. It will help you communicate better. And just, I'd say communicate better as a person, as a wife, as a spouse. It's been really a positive influence in our lives. So definitely do it.
I'd say definitely do it. It's so worth it. The money really is inconsequential when you get so much benefit from being a better parent to your children and feeling like you're connecting more with them and not feeling like you're yelling all the time or you're like, why isn't things working? I would say definitely do it. It's so worth it. It'll change you.
No matter what age someone's child is, it's a great opportunity for personal growth and it's a great investment in someone's family. I'm very thankful I had this.
You can continue in your old habits that aren't working, or you can learn some new tools and gain some perspective to shift everything in your parenting.
Are you frustrated by parenting? Do you listen to the experts and try all the tips and strategies, but you're just not seeing the results that you want? Or are you lost as to where to start? Does it all seem so overwhelming with too much to learn? Are you yearning for a community of people who get it, who also don't want to threaten and punish to create cooperation? Hi, I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, and if you answered yes to any of these questions, I want you to seriously consider the Mindful Parenting membership. You'll be joining hundreds of members who have discovered the path of mindful parenting and now have confidence and clarity in their parenting. This isn't just another parenting class. This is an opportunity to really discover your unique, lasting relationship, not only with your children, but with yourself. It will translate into lasting, connected relationships, not only with your children, but your partner too. Let me change your life. Go to mindfulparentingcourse.com to add your name to the waitlist, so you will be the first to be notified when I open the membership for enrollment. I look forward to seeing you on the inside. mindfulparentingcourse.com.